So as far as motility in the stomach, there's two primary functions of stomach movement. So one of them is going to be mixing the bolus, taking that bolus food, as you can see over there, and it is going to be mixed with all of the gastric juice. And as you can see, when that happens, it's going to be broken apart and it is going to form chyme. So this is going to be a form of mechanical digestion. So what's happening here is you're going to have this kind of mixing movement, and it's going to come from the that oblique layer, but also, of course, the other layers as well. But that's why we have that oblique layer, is this nice churning and mixture that we're going to have. So what it does is, again, it's going to reduce the swallowed particles, and it changes it into chyme. And chyme is going to be a semi-digested bolus, right? Because really we've only partially digested carbohydrates, not completely, because amylase doesn't break it into the monosaccharides that we need, and we'll talk about how we further break it down. And we've only partially digested proteins, and we've hardly done anything with fats either. So chyme is going to be, it's pretty viscous. It's kind of a paste. The book calls it like a paste-like soup, and I can't get that picture in my head. But it's a very, very viscous, highly acidic mixture that is going to form here in the stomach. The second motility in the stomach is going to be gastric emptying. So this is going to be the movement of that acidic chyme moving from the stomach into the duodenum. So if we go back to this is showing how you are going to have the chyme being mixed. And then you're going to have those peristaltic waves that are going to start to move down the body of the stomach towards the pylorus. And it actually is going to kind of create this pressure gradient because of that contraction that's happening. It creates a pressure gradient, and that pressure gradient is going to go in, and it's going to force the pylorus, that pyloric sphincter, open. So, and whenever that pyloric sphincter opens, only a small volume of chyme enters the duodenum. It's only like 3 millimeters, very small amount. We don't want to just dump it all in there. And that's actually a phenomenon. It's called gastric dumping. And that's where you have too much of that chyme that's being dumped into the duodenum. And since the duodenum is really important, and the rest of the small intestine, and making sure that we break down the rest of our nutrients for chemical digestion and absorption, we need to make sure that this is highly regulated, and just a little bit of chyme goes through at a time for this to specialize. So as soon as that chyme goes through, it quickly is going to close. You can see that sphincter is closing right here. And then it is the materials are going to actually move back into the body of the stomach, and this is called retropulsion. That's what this word is right here. It's going to be that movement of fluid or chyme back up into the body of the stomach. And that's actually really important, because we can go in and mix this food even more. So we'll have it mix and mix, and then it's going to go through, and it's going to push it down again and empty a little bit more of the chyme out, and then it's going to retropulse back, and it's just going to keep doing this until we push everything out of the stomach. So let's take a look and see how this process is regulated here. It's got to be highly regulated, right? I just talked about how important it is to make sure that just a small amount of the chyme goes through. So the stomach is going to be this little holding bag of partially digested food. We just talked about that's what chyme is. It's a semi-digested, paste-like, soupy material. What happens is you have these little pacemaker cells in the stomach, and they are going to spontaneously depolarize. And what that does is it is going to innervate the muscles there. It's going to establish this basic rhythm of muscular contraction. So what's happening in your stomach is going to be that actual, that it's going to be very planned there. And the signals are going to spread through that muscle, the smooth muscle in that muscularis layer. So we're going to take a look at how the force of the contraction and the gastric gland secretion is going to be highly regulated by two things: the nervous system and the endocrine system, of course, because they usually regulate the most important things here. So this is going to be organized into 3 phases, and they are basically going to be named by where they are located, or where it's happening. So the first one we'll take a look at is the cephalic phase. And I say cephalic, or if you think about cephalic is going to be the head region, and this is really where it comes from, is because what sets it off is, not only is it because it's kind of on the cephalic portion, you know, the upper portion of the stomach, but what sets it off is going to be everything in your head, you know, the sight of food, the smell of food, the taste of food, even thinking of food if you haven't eaten very long. What that does is it is going to send a signal to the nervous system. So the nerve signals from higher regions of the brain sent to, that is going to be sent to the hypothalamus, and then that is going to relay a signal to the medulla oblongata. So remember we talked about, or you might have talked about this in 2401, how the hypothalamus is, that's where our hunger drive is, and that's why hypothalamus is going to be in here. So what happens here is when we do have that signal relayed to the medulla, it is going to increase vagal stimulation of the stomach. So a couple of things are going to happen here. So as you can see, the first thing that's going to happen is you're actually going to have an increase in motility. So you can kind of see that stomach moving a little bit, but not really. But that's going to be the first thing, is you're going to increase the contraction force. That is going to increase motility of the stomach. But another thing that's going to happen is it's also going to go in, it's going to increase these secretions right here. So it stimulates secretory activity. It stimulates the mucus glands or the mucus cells. It stimulates the chief cells, the parietal cells, and we'll talk about the G cells here in a minute. But what it's doing is it's going to secrete gastric juice. It's preparing the stomach. It's like, ooh, yeah, we smell food. We're about to eat. I'm getting ready for it. And then your stomach's moving, and that's when your stomach starts growling, right? It's because of the fact that you are setting off this whole involuntary mechanism that's happening because you're smelling or tasting or thinking about food, and your stomach starts to move, and it makes this noise because there's nothing inside of it. It wants to be fed. So let's take a look and see what happens when we actually do feed it. So this is going to be the gastric phase, and this is going to, there's a couple of things that are going to set this off. So as soon as that bolus reaches the stomach, your stomach is going to stretch out. It is going to distend. So those stretch receptors are going to go back to the plexuses that are going to be there, and that is going to set off a couple of things that we'll talk about here. And also another thing that's happening is that as we dump food in there, it's going to elevate the pH because it's fairly alkaline. If you think about the things that you eat and the things that you drink, it's fairly alkaline. Some things are not so alkaline. They can be pretty acidic, but it is going to go in and elevate that pH. So that is going to trigger these chemoreceptors. And what this does is it is going to regulate the motility, and it's also going to go in and regulate the secretory activities. So we're going to have the same thing happening here. So it's regulated via the gastric reflex and through the release of gastrin. So the gastric reflex is going to go in and it's going to cause more mixing waves. So remember, the reason why our stomach does this mixing movement is to take that bolus of food, mix it with our gastric juice. Remember, we were making that gastric juice, getting ready for food. We're going to continue to make gastric juice. Here it is. As you can see, it goes in and keeps on stimulating these cells. So we can go in and keep on secreting mucus to protect that stomach wall layer, because look, we are secreting hydrochloric acid. We are secreting pepsinogen because it knows that there are some proteins in here that needs to be broken down. But another thing that's going to be secreted here is going to be gastrin. Really what gastrin does, as you can see, is it does the same thing that our neural stimulation did. It goes in and it also is going to, it has to go through this whole process. It's secreted from the stomach. It gets into the bloodstream, it has to travel around the bloodstream to go back to the stomach to stimulate all of those secretory cells, and it also stimulates muscle movement as well, more mixing movements. So that's what these are going to do here in the gastric phase. So it's going in and it's mixing it up, churning it, getting it all ready to be released. So the gastric phase, this is where your stomach stays mostly when right after you eat, right? Is going to be the gastric phase. And then you're going to, of course, move into, but this process actually takes time as well. If you think about it, if you're only squirting in 3 milliliters into the duodenum, it's going to take a little bit of time. So the intestinal phase is going to, again, it's the process following that chyme that is going to go into the small intestine. So what we have is we're going to have some hormones, some more hormones that are going to come into play. One of these you are not going to be able, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to worry about, and that's this GIP. You can just mark that off like I did. But what happens here is that as the hydrochloric acid is being secreted, and as it's mixing with the chyme, the pH is going to start to decrease, right? Because it's hydrochloric acid. What that does is that is going to stimulate the release of secretin. So secretin is actually secreted from the small intestine. So once the food enters into the duodenum, and that's why it's called the intestinal phase, is because of the fact that it is going to, the sensors are going to be here in the duodenum. So the duodenal cells are going to sense that decrease in pH. Secretin is going to be secreted. We'll talk about what it does here in a second. But another thing is that it's going to sense the presence of lipids and carbohydrates as well. And that is going to trigger the secretion of CCK, that's cholecystokinin. What this does is it goes and it is going to stop the secretion of the gastric juice. So it already knows that, hey, we've already mixed this bolus of food and it's chyme and it's already dumping into the duodenum. We don't need any more gastric juice, no more. Another thing is that it's going to stop peristalsis. It's going to decrease the motility of the stomach. And the reason why is it's going to allow that small intestine to go in and digest the food, take it in and digest the food and slowly move it through. Another thing that's going to be triggered is as the duodenum stretches because chyme is entering, that's also going to go in there and stimulate that myenteric plexus as well. So that is going to be your how tightly your stomach, the digestive process of the stomach is going to be regulated there.